these to you. Otherwise, it turns into a bedtime story. But what you should do is make sure you keep the list of short free response questions, long free response questions, and a bullet point nearby. That way, as you go through the slides and you come across the answers to any of those, you can write the slide number next to that short free response question or that bullet point, whatever helps you. Now, the first time you look at the slide, just listen to it. You can stop it and restart it as many times as you want. After you've listened to it, go back, fill in missing information, and add any additional notes. That's going to help you. And let me get out. Let's go ahead and start with, what is environmental science? This unit presents an overview of environmental science and the history of humans in the environment. To solve environmental problems, we must be able to identify and describe the solutions. This unit also examines environmental science in a social and economic context. Now, for a lot of people, when someone mentions the term environment, people think of a beautiful scene such as a stream flowing through a wilderness area or a rainy forest canopy alive with blooming flowers and howling monkeys. You might not think of your backyard or neighbor's yard as part of the environment. In fact, the environment is everything around us. It includes the natural world as well as the things produced by humans. But the environment is more than what you can see. It is a complex web of relationships that connects with us in the world we live in. On a second bullet point, it includes a study of the human impacts on the environment and involves physical aspects, biological activities, and social sciences of animals and other living organisms around them. Let's go over 2 examples of that. There's a growing need to understand the environment as a whole, including both its biological and physical features. A wide variety of people contribute to this understanding of the environment, including high school students. In the 1990s, students at Keene High School studied dwarf wedge mussels in Ashuelot River of New Hampshire. The mussels, which were once abundant in the river, were in danger of disappearing, and the students wanted to know why. The students tested the water samples from different parts of the river, conducted experiments, and asked questions. The students' efforts were highly praised and widely recognized. More importantly, their work contributed to an ongoing community effort that is still working today that preserves the endangered dwarf wedge mussels. The students' work is just one example of a field called environmental science, the study of the environment that includes the physical and biological as well as social studies used. Let's go over one more example, something a little closer to home. Lately, as I've gone out to lakes and rivers where boating does occur quite often here in Texas, you'll see a lot of signs warning boats to inspect their vehicles of zebra mussels. Environmental news stories often focus on efforts to preserve a threatened or endangered species, but sometimes the problem is the opposite. Species can overpopulate in an ecosystem. Species that are introduced from another location and thrive in the absence of predators are called invasive species. The zebra mussel is one example of an invasive species. The zebra mussel was introduced into the Great Lakes near Detroit in 1989 from the ballast of an ocean-going ship. Since then, it has spread through 23 states and 2 Canadian provinces. Zebra mussels cause about 50 million to 100 million in damages each year by blocking water intakes and outflows for power plants and water treatment facilities. They continue to spread and pose a threat to many of the waterways in North America. The goals of environmental science. Environmental scientists have found the environment is influenced by people and that people are influenced by the environment. A major goal of many environmental science is to understand and solve environmental problems. To address this goal, environmental science study 2 main types of interactions between humans and the environment. One area of study focuses on how we use natural resources, such as water and plants. The other area studies on how our actions alter the environment. Environmental science must gather and analyze information from many different disciplines. Even though environmental scientists want to solve environmental problems, They are not the same as environmentalists. Science studying the environment to accurately describe the environmental systems and determine how they work. Scientists also can use data and mathematical models to predict how systems might change under different scenarios. It is up to the public, special interest groups, and politicians to make decisions on how to manage the environment. Environmentalism is a social movement that seeks to protect the environment, and because we all depend on the people, the environment. Environmental science is an interdisciplinary science, which means it involves many fields of science. Ecology is to study how living things interact with each other and with their non-living environment. Make sure you know what ecology is. You need to be able to compare that against environmental science. There's several other ones: geology, botany. Studying the environment also involves studying human populations. Environmental science uses many social sciences, which include economics, law, politics, and geography. Social sciences can help us answer questions such as how does humans migrate from rural to urban areas affect the local environment? Now, I want to focus on a left-hand column too much, but on a right-hand column, you need to know several of these. Zoology, botany, microbiology, ecology. Ecology is a big one. Know the definition of that one. The other ones, just know that these science fields exist. Hydrology, biochemistry, geochemistry, and that should be good. Have those memorized for a test. Scientists as citizens, citizens as scientists. Governments, businesses, and cities recognize that studying our environment is vital to maintaining a healthy and productive society. They also recognize it as an interruption to their ability to produce products that give them financial gain. An example of this would be Rachel Carlson's Silent Spring. Rachel Carlson was a marine biologist with a minor in ecology that focused on pesticides. This was during the 60s and 70s, kind of a hippie-ish era. During that time, and even up into the late 80s, DDT was used quite liberally to spray areas for pests. What was starting to happen because of that is animals would lay eggs that had weakened shells and the creatures would not make it through birth. A good example of this was the bald eagle. So Rachel Carlson, alarmed by the increasing levels of pesticides and other chemicals in the environment, biologist Rachel Carlson published Silent Spring in 1962. Carlson imagined a spring morning that was silent because the birds and frogs were dead after being poisoned by pesticides. Kind of a dark imagination. Carlson's carefully researched book was enthusiastically received by the public. It was read by many other scientists, as well as policymakers and politicians. However, many people in the chemical industry saw Silent Spring as a threat to their pesticide sales and launched a $250,000 campaign to discredit Carlson. Carlson's research prevailed, although she died in 1964. Unaware of the book that she had written, was instrumental in the birth of modern environmental movement. So, what about other people? We talked about scientists as citizens and citizens as scientists. Carlson would have been a scientist as a citizen. Citizens as scientists, often the observation of non-scientists are the first step towards addressing an environmental problem. For example, middle school students first noticed the appearance of deformed frogs in Minnesota lakes. At the same time, the students in Dublin High School in Ohio have studied the habitat of endangered box turtles. A habitat is a place where an organism usually lives. The students wanted to find out how the turtles lived and what factors affect their nesting and their hibernation in the sites that they live. The students tracked and mapped the turtles' movement, measured atmospheric conditions, and analyzed soil samples. These efforts were important because the box turtle's habitat is threatened. The students have presented their findings to city planners in an effort to protect the most sensitive turtle habitats.